In the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle wrote, "For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them." Yep, that means that we learn things in the process of doing them, and why in many speech and communication classes, students are required to analyze a piece of rhetoric, like a speech, using a particular analysis tool, such as Aristotle's artistic proofs of ethos, pathos, and logos. This type of analysis can go by many names, like rhetorical or communication analysis, or rhetorical criticism. Analysis, which, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a detailed examination of anything complex in order to understand its essential features, a thorough study. Exactly what Aristotle was referring to, learning by doing, and communication is definitely complex. And in this case, criticism refers to the art of evaluating or analyzing works of art or literature. That means looking for both the good and the not so good aspects. This video will focus on how to present a rhetorical analysis in written form, starting with recognizing the purpose of the assignment, the basic concepts of rhetorical criticism, and then how a rhetorical analysis paper should be organized. One major caveat: no one can guarantee a perfect paper. Beyond the obvious, your writing skills and style, professors may provide different overall instructions. For example, some may require a literature review of the analysis tool, the rhetoric, or both, so make sure you know what they are asking for, including reaching out to them for information. This includes the desired paper format and style, like page count or word count, if you should be conducting additional research, the formality of the writing style, and if you should be using MLA or APA. There are some significant differences between the two, especially in the reference style. The obvious purpose of your assignment is to demonstrate that you understand a rhetorical theory or model, the analysis tool, and can apply it to determine the strengths and weaknesses of a communication message, the rhetoric. In the process, you are making two major arguments. The first is more of a soft sell and something you should do with every paper you write. You are persuading your professor that you are worthy of a good grade. You support this argument by writing well, of course, and showing you can follow the assignment instructions, including the paper formatting requirements. In the case of a rhetorical analysis paper, you need to demonstrate that you understand the model you are using and how to apply it to a piece of rhetoric. The second argument is the one you overtly make in your rhetorical analysis, your assessment of the rhetoric as effective or ineffective. The rest of your paper then supports your overall argument with your last paragraph or section restating your assessment. Before putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, it's important to understand the basic concepts that go into a rhetorical analysis paper, such as the rhetoric, analysis tool, and the common parts of an analysis. In this case, the rhetoric is what you are analyzing. Many times your professor will provide it, while other times you are responsible for finding it. In the past, rhetorical criticism related specifically to speeches, oral presentations. However, the concept of rhetoric can be expanded to all forms of communication, including advertisements, essays, television shows, and more. To analyze this rhetoric, you will need a model or a theory, or what I'm calling the analysis tool. Think of it as a lens you can look through to highlight and analyze different parts of the rhetoric. For example, Aristotle's rhetorical proofs would allow you to focus on how ethos, pathos, and logos are being used, while Cicero's canons of rhetoric would emphasize invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. There are a variety of other tools beyond these two, like Kenneth Burke's dramatistic pentad, Walter Fisher's narrative paradigm, Ernest Borman's rhetorical vision theory, even specialized tools like the theory of apology or Hugh Rank's intensified downplay schema. Again, what is your professor requiring? Sometimes you may focus on only one or two of the model elements, like solely on how ethos is used. Or you want to combine two theories, like Aristotle's logos and Cicero's arrangement. If you do this, you need to justify why you chose your approach. Of course, you'll need to have a fair understanding of both the rhetoric and the model before you start your paper, but you'll likely develop more insight into both during the paper writing process. You learn by doing. That brings us to the common parts of an analysis, which I learned as DIE. Die. Describe, interpret, and evaluate. Describe what is occurring in the rhetoric and how it relates to parts of the model. Then interpret what it means and evaluate whether it works or doesn't. As you write, assume your reader doesn't really know the model or the rhetoric. And perhaps more importantly, draw the connections for the reader. Don't assume, describe and explain. Constantly ask yourself why, how, and what. Why did the communicator choose this approach or example? How would it connect or not connect with the audience? What could the communicator have done differently? What did they include or leave out? I find it helps to write at least a rudimentary outline, which leads us to the next step, the paper's organization. Although it follows a basic intro, body, conclusion, there are some things that need to be included in each section. And of course, remember the caveat and check what your professor wants. I tend to start by drafting the body of the paper and then finish up with the introduction and conclusion. That's because the act of analyzing the rhetoric often changes the way I think about it. However, we'll go through the paper's organization in the order someone would read it. You already know the introduction should catch the reader's attention so they want to continue reading. Depending on the length of your paper, this could be 1 or 2 paragraphs. The introduction includes the following: the rhetoric being analyzed, your thesis or argument, and what you are using to analyze the rhetoric, the analysis tool, not necessarily in that order. You'll end the introduction with a preview statement. Remember that the rhetoric is what is being analyzed. Explain what the rhetoric is and the context. Is it a speech from YouTube? Who was the audience? What was the occasion? What was the historical context? And you may need to explain why it is worthy of analysis or why you chose it. Your thesis statement is your overall argument. Did you find the rhetoric to be generally effective or ineffective? I say generally because it may not be a black and white situation. Most of the time you'll find some effective and ineffective use of rhetoric, but one will likely outweigh the other. Somewhere in the introduction, you need to identify your analysis tool. That's the theory, model, tactic, or lens that you are using to analyze the rhetoric, crediting the source. You might need to give a brief description of the analysis tool without going into all of the intricacies. Yet. Remember, you are writing the paper as if your reader doesn't really know about it. Unless you wrote your thesis or argument in a preview-ish way, I just made that word up, your introduction ends with a preview or a roadmap, alerting your reader to your paper's main points, mentioning which aspect of the model your paper will focus on. Something like, by applying Aristotle's rhetorical tropes of ethos, pathos, and logos to this TED Talk, we can see how Dr. Trice is trying to persuade us using a variety of techniques. While this sounds like a lot to cover in a paragraph or two, it's really not. The bulk of your paper supports the argument you made in your thesis statement. This is your analysis. You develop the main points you identified in your previous statement. Throughout this section, you'll provide a brief explanation of the various concepts or aspects of the concept being used and apply the concept to the rhetoric. In the process, you'll offer 1 or more examples that demonstrate the theory or tactic. You can describe, cite verbatim, or paraphrase. This is the describe part of the analysis. Then explain how the example you provided represents or demonstrates the concept and what it might mean. This is your interpretation. Be overt about the link between the concept, description, and interpretation. As readers, we want to see it spelled out for us. Virtually nothing is obvious. Continually ask yourself, why? Why did the communicator use this approach? What else could the communicator have done? Dig deep. Finally, you need to provide some sort of evaluation. Did you find it effective or ineffective, appropriate, inappropriate, strong, weak, etc.? And again, why do you think so? Then you move on to the next concept, repeating the procedure: describe, interpret, evaluate. Your conclusion includes a summary or brief review of the main points and provides your overall evaluation, which should match your thesis statement. If it doesn't, change your thesis statement because you really did learn by doing. Consider adding what can be learned from this analysis. Again, not necessarily in that order. If required, don't forget to include your research in the appropriate referencing style. With a better awareness of both the purpose of rhetorical analysis and the basic concepts, you should now be able to apply them to a piece of rhetoric, as well as organize your paper to present your findings. Remember the caveat? There are no guarantees of a perfect paper, or even an A paper, but while it may not be the most fun paper to write, you will likely be better for the effort and on your way to becoming a good rhetorical critic.